Hey folks, Kevin here. Well, it's December 9th, 2024, and today what I thought I'd do is review some of the basics of composting. Now, on our website at mindfullivingsanctuary.com, I have a whole variety of different articles on everything to do with homesteading, leaf mold, wood chips, using wood chips, soil, a whole variety of different articles that I've written in the past, and I'll be posting an article similar to what's going on in the slideshow here. This is an abbreviated slide presentation on our website as well. And again, that's mindfullivingsanctuaries.com. The reason that I'm going to delve into recovering some of these topics that I've covered years ago in videos is because I continue to get questions about, geez, what do you use for fertility for your blueberry plants or for your the trees in the food forest, and tell me more about how you're using these wood chips and wood ash from our stove to weeds and composting weeds. All of those sorts of topics come up, or questions I get or concerns that I get from the videos that I post. So this first one's going to be about just going over the different types of compost, because we really want to enhance the soil that we're growing our plants in, because it's the soil that actually is the most important part for growing healthy fruit, vegetables, and nuts and all. So that's what we're going to talk about, is a few different ways of composting. So why composting matters? Well, it enriches the soil, supports plant health, it promotes sustainability and stewardship. We're stewards of this land, and trying to take good care of the soil is really important so that we can feed ourselves a high nutrient food sources. It really helps to mitigate waste and recycles organic material if we're composting properly. Careful management ensures quality and avoids issues like contamination or nutrient loss. And so we'll go into this further. Basic components of composting, well, we got our greens, we got our browns. We water, the appropriate water moisture levels is very essential for enhancing microbial activity. It can get too wet and it can get too dry. Oxygen, regularly turning your compost is going to increase the exposure to oxygen, which increases the efficiency of the microbial communities that are decomposing the materials that we're composting, so that they can do a quicker and more efficient job at breaking things down. And that oxygen is really essential so that we don't go into an anaerobic state. We want to maintain an aerobic conditions, if at all possible. Thermophilic composting. Now, I made lots of videos with large piles of manure and weeds and leafy materials, paper components as well. Actually, composting kitty litter as well. Now, we don't use clay sources, so I've made videos about all these topics in the past, quite a few videos on composting. And it's when we're talking about thermophilic composting, we really want to achieve a temperature range over 130 degrees Fahrenheit and probably up to 170 degrees Fahrenheit. If we're getting up to 135 degrees Fahrenheit, we're able to kill the pathogens in the compostable materials, devitalize the weed seeds, and inactivate most herbicides, even persistent herbicides, if it's done properly at high enough temperatures, and if the compost has been completed. In other words, the temperature has neutralized. It's no longer in the active phase of composting. You really have to monitor the temperatures and moisture very closely, and you've got to turn it when you're achieving those temperatures and moisture content. So it's much more labor intensive, and it requires more monitoring. I have those long, about 3 foot long thermometers that I use to do the large piles that I do. But this can certainly be done with a pitchfork and basically like a garbage can or two garbage cans full, or just making a small pallet housing for doing this composting. In my opinion, this is the most nutrient rich, the most diverse, it offers the possibility for the most diverse microbial community as well, and it's really ideal. And you can do it at a relatively inexpensive rate, so it isn't going to cost you a bunch of money to do it, unless you're using a big equipment like I do. So cold composting, that's really a low maintenance way of composting. You're taking that organic material and it just slowly decomposes. It isn't aimed at achieving the high temperatures that I want to achieve. It isn't turning the pile as quickly. The weed seeds will not be devitalized, and pathogens may survive through the process as well. So there's more of a chance that you're going to have more work at dealing with weeds after using this sort of composting method, and a possibility that some of the plant pathogens that can devitalize or hinder the growth and development of the plants that you're growing as well. So they may survive as a result of cold composting techniques. So, and there's often lots of larger material left in the cold composting system, so it should be screened to get down to the best, most usable parts of the compost. Vermicomposting. We've made videos about our vermicomposting techniques. It's been years since I've done that. Usually using little red wiggler worms. They are absolutely essential. They can really break down the material very well. However, the temperature, moisture, and bedding has to be tightly controlled. And as the colony of the red wigglers grow and develop, you've got to feed it more regularly. You've got to pay close attention to the odor so that we're not going anaerobic as well. Sometimes it requires mixing as well until it really requires some time getting used to vermicomposting techniques. However, the results are amazing, and they're really good for small scale systems. So that those worm castings are loaded with nutrients and really great. But if you want to do a large scale system and doing large garden beds like we've done, it isn't practical. It's really not meant for larger scale systems, and it can be very expensive as well. Aerated static pile composting. That's where like drainage pipes are used with a fan blowing system, and they're a static pile. So what they're doing is they're blowing air, which is going to have the oxygen in the air, and that air is going to move its way through the pile over time. And so that really reduces labor costs as well. But there's we don't get as thorough a decomposition, and you still have the potential for the weed seeds, you still have the possibility for the pathogen. If there's persistent herbicides there, they're probably going to persist in this sort of composting system as well. It's faster than just using a stagnant pile like the previous slide, but it does work. So when you're understanding the composting methods that the place that you're buying compost from is really important. Are they taking the necessary steps to reduce the likelihood of persistent herbicides coming into static piles or aerated static piles? Are they doing that? It's really getting to know the person that you're buying the compost from, or if you're doing it yourself, understanding the different pluses and minuses, benefits and challenges with each system. So there's a lot less work. You can take time and get this done, but it does require some equipment like a fan or a blower and some piping in the system as well. leaf mold composting. So leaf mold is really, really nutritious. It creates a really nice soil that's good for a soil amendment that's really good for potting plants. It's good for improving the soil structure. It helps to retain moisture for the roots as well. It's relatively lightweight. It certainly is easier. It's a nice, simple, and almost, for many people, easily accessible source of getting leaves to do composting. Now, the system that we use, we enhance the nutrient content by adding different green materials, because predominantly you're talking about mostly browns, the carbon sources, and you don't have much nitrogen sources. But by regularly turning it, and I've made videos about our leaf mold system that we use, and I use Elon the excavator to actually help me get this. And we're fortunate enough to be able to get access to quite a few leaves so that we can break this down. We can break it down pretty quickly. But otherwise, in most situations, if people aren't doing the leaf turning, leaf mold turning, turning the leaf mold pile regularly, it can take 1 to 2 years for it to break down. And it won't be as nutrient dense unless you're turning it and adding nitrogen sources as well. So, and that can wait until springtime when there's grass clippings there available, garden waste, kitchen scraps, all of those sorts of things. And I'll be making a video about using the wood stove ash and the biochar, or the charcoal, the small charcoal components that are left inside of the wood stove after a thorough burn. But when the oxygen runs out, so I'll be making a video about that as well. So this is a very good, inexpensive way of enhancing your system. And one of the things I would say is that this leaf mold composting system, since in most situations it doesn't have a high nitrogen source when most people do it, it is very good for using as a mulching system. So if you're doing another system where you've got either vermicompost or you're inoculating it, and I'll be making videos about some of the inoculation systems that we can do. In other words, increasing the number of diverse microbial microbes that we can put around the base of our plants, and that will allow the plants to do very well. And with this slowly decomposing leaf mold that's put down on the top of the inoculant, this gives more food for those microbes that you fertilize with or add nutrients or inoculate with, so that the leaf mold can further break down. The same thing with wood chips as well, as if you're using wood chips to do some composting. So some concerns with these modern compost systems and all: forever chemicals. These are the PFAs that don't break down, and we know with DuPont and other chemical manufacturers with their Teflon, the waterproofing materials or fireproofing materials that are used on our clothing as well, and our shoes to make them waterproof. So these forever chemicals can end up in our compost, and so that's really important to talk about your compost supplier. What steps they're taking to mitigate persistent herbicides, and those are the ones that actually the herbicides that are put onto crops, and then the large animals, the herbivores, will consume those crops in their feed, and they produce a beautiful manure, but those herbicides persist in that manure, and therefore the most effective way of dealing with those persistent herbicides is thermophilic composting. That's getting the temperatures up, the regular turning, moisture and oxygen levels, all of those things. The thermophilic can kill the weed seeds and devitalize pathogens, so that we're not reinfecting our garden beds with more work to be done in the future and potentially harmful pathogens that can decrease the viability of the plants that we're growing in our gardens. The other thing to be aware of is incomplete compost. So if the compost is hot, it's not completely broken down. Those decomposer microorganisms in that compost haven't finished breaking down the materials all the way. So be aware of that. You want to complete the composting system. It smells real earthy. It doesn't have any manure smells or anything like that, and you can put your hand deep into the pile without feeling a tremendous amount of heat as well. Let's see, risk of improper composting. So this is a major concern all over the world, but here in the United States, runoff, leachates. So we want to make sure that we're not allowing the phosphorus and nitrogen to leave the composting pile system. So it's really good to visit the persons or the resource that you have for purchasing your compost, and look at their setup and make sure that they aren't creating more problems. If they're not mitigating or taking steps to prevent runoff, then the compost that they're making isn't going to be as valuable for your garden plants as well. Making sure that they aren't going into anaerobic conditions, which gives you that methane smell and foul smells. Poorly managed piles can result in nutrient loss and erosion as well. Really just being aware of some of these caveats for properly setting up your composting system, or examining the composter that you're purchasing your compost from. Often, so many nurseries will sell compost, and they'll often tell you, "Oh, this is the best compost." Well, you need to go to the compost supplier that actually generates the compost that the nursery gets the compost from. Those are my thoughts, anyways. The role of compost in soil health, well, it's essential. So when we're doing really nice and really balanced thermophilic composting, that is pretty much, I think, is the ideal situation, where you really not only have the nutrients available for the plants that are there, but you have a diverse group of microbes. You're enhancing the microbial community, and of course, this helps with soil structure. So we ideally doing no-till is best. Heavily mulching and using no-till, terminating your cover crops. Or planting cover crops, terminating them appropriately. So keeping that soil nice and healthy, and by using compost, we can enhance the microbial diversity in there. Certainly the nutrients, if we're adding ashes from our wood stoves, potassium can get in there, phosphorus as well, and we certainly need to have appropriate levels of nitrogen and the micronutrients as well. And with good composting systems, we're going to have good water retention, and we'll be sequestering more carbon. Many people have commented on some of my videos saying that all the carbon's just going up into the atmosphere. Well, actually, a lot of that carbon just goes right into the plants and the trees that we're growing and all. So yes, carbon, CO2 is released into the atmosphere. If things aren't done well, methane will get released as well. So, but all in all, we're composting recycles organic material that otherwise could be lost to the environment. Future content and exploration, I plan on creating more videos on going over the thermophilic composting system as well, and safety systems. The leaf mold systems, I'll continue to make more videos about that as well. and I'll be going over I'm going to create some videos on a new way that I'm increasing microbial communities in our soil using low cost, really scalable composting solutions for our garden beds and for food forests as well. So, and it'll just take a little bit of sea salt, a little bit of some potatoes that we cook, and some leaf mold or some other source of microbes that we want to create a ferment that will enhance the nutrients and the microbial communities in our soil. And then if we're doing that as a cost-effective way, so we don't have to do lots of composting, then we can use mulching systems on top of that, which will continue to feed those microorganisms that we inoculate into our growing beds as well. So more videos to come in the future. So sort of went through this pretty quickly. There will be an article on our website covering this topic, mindfullivingsanctuaries.com, mindfullivingsanctuary.com rather. And I think that's it for today's video. If you have any comments or questions, leave them below. And I look forward to any ideas. Oh, there's one more thing I'll mention. Another YouTuber friend, Tim from Tim's World, one of the things that he does with his garden beds, and now he lives in southern Ohio, and he's got lots of clay soil. So, and he's venturing into more and more into no-till gardening as well, or minimum tillage as well. And so he's just using hay to heavily mulch the area, and he plants right into those areas. So there are ways of gradually building soil that's going to meet the needs of your plants that are very scalable and very good, and they're nice levels to starting off at. And that's Tim from Tim's World. So that's it for today's video. Thanks so much for watching. Stay safe and take care. Bye-bye now.